Welcome back, Ian. We had an amazing conversation about your idea to put a memorial web page on your site for our fallen Jamaicans in the diaspora. I just want to ask you about the divide, because we just got into something that has been intriguing me for years and years and years. You did mention in our last interview that you're still divided across the Caribbean, and that is extenuated here in England. Yeah, we see, and I will talk about Yorkshire, and then my own town of Huddersfield, Kirklees, West London. We seem to not trust each other. We also don't seem to value each other's expertise, and I know this from my elders. They call it red eye. Yeah, if you have something that I haven't got, then I will spread poison about it. Yeah.
Sure.
That is just continuous in our community. I'd like to ask you, Ian, where did that start from, and why haven't we broke that cycle?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's quite honestly, it's a product of the history.
Okay.
The whole divide and rule from our British colonial days. It has to do with probably the ethnic and racial composition of the Caribbean. And it also has to do with size. And as a Jamaican, I think the issue of physical size of population is an important factor. We in Jamaica, at least the unlettered people, the uneducated, seem to see the smaller islands of the Caribbean as being less than Jamaica because of its physical size. And the very persistence of the term small island in reference to everywhere except Jamaica is proof of that mindset, that because you're smaller, you're somehow less than Jamaica. And so we look at people from the rest of the Caribbean that way, and vice versa in terms of a reaction by people from the rest of the Caribbean. I mean, on the one hand, they admire Jamaica, but on the one hand, there's this kind of resentment about the Jamaican attitude, so to speak. So and that hasn't changed.
Are you learning to see the problem on Jamaicans for the divide right across the Caribbean and here at home? Well, you did mention...
In a way, I do see it as a problem of Jamaican origin, because I have traveled the Caribbean extensively. I've been to every country of the Caribbean. I used to travel the region 5-6 times a year, spending days, sometimes weeks in some of these islands doing business. And it marveled me. I mean, it amazed me that in the 1950s and 60s, our leaders could be thinking of a political federation. Because when you leave Jamaica and you go to the rest of the Southern Caribbean, you immediately feel this divide. It's a physical divide. And when you get down to the rest of the Caribbean, you can feel this divide among those islands disappears. So there's this kind of natural synergy between islands of the Eastern and Southern Caribbean, which they don't share with Jamaica. And there's absolutely no question about that.
So the life of the Caribbean is really on its own.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, if you think about, for instance, things like vacation, for instance, Jamaica would never conceive of spending a family vacation in any of the smaller islands of the Caribbean, even though they might have the kind of tourism facilities that they go for in Mexico or wherever. But we never think southwards. We always think northwards, and that's a Jamaican thing. And I think Jamaica has a lot of responsibility to bear for this continuing divide in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
I say so as a Jamaican, but it's speaking from the standpoint of traveling the region and feeling it and seeing it in action.
I'm not sure if I can take what you've just said there and put it in Kirklees or Huddersfield or York, because it's not tangible, is it? It's an attitude.
It's an attitude, yes, yeah.
It's an attitude. And all I was discussing with you earlier on was the end of that attitude, not necessarily the beginning of it. So it started back there. Did the enslavement of African descendants have anything to do with it? And Jamaica was an island where they used to break the slaves. Would that have anything to add to why Jamaicans might feel superior to the other islands?
I don't want to go into the because again, if you pursue that to its logical extension, you'd have to go back to Africa.
That's right. Yeah.
And to identify the ethnic origins of Africans who came to different parts of the Caribbean. Yeah. And there is a school of thought that says the Africans who came to Jamaica were from certain tribes who were fiercer and more warlike. Even if that were the case, that was reinforced by British colonial policy and by the very physical nature of these islands. That Barbados, for instance, which is a very small island, which was very heavily populated, a flat island with no mountains on which the enslaved could escape. It was much easier to control the enslaved in those islands, and that is why you find that Jamaica, which is physically larger, had more slave uprisings in Jamaica than all the rest of the Caribbean put together. So, the anecdotal evidence is suggesting that, yes, it has to do, but it goes back to my point about physical size. And there's a beautiful analysis, which I would like to strongly recommend, that was done recently in a book by Orlando Patterson, the Confounding Island, described in Jamaica, in which the first chapter, he does a magisterial comparison between Jamaica and Barbados and why Barbados has developed the way it has compared to Jamaica. If one reads nothing else in the next few years in trying to understand the differences between Jamaica's and Barbados' development, we'll read a chapter from that book.
Well, final question before we wrap up then. How do we move this forward? I mean, do you feel in your lifetime that you will see a united Caribbean, and will I see a united African Caribbean British descendant community nationally, linking with the international diaspora of people of African descent? Do you think you're ever going to see that?
I can't speak about the UK. And in fact, I think in the UK, you have a better chance of achieving that, because in a way, all African peoples in Britain are joined together to confront one enemy, which of course is white prejudice and white marginalization. We don't have that kind of incentive in the Caribbean. And as I say, having traveled the region for 40 years, I think we are, in fact, in many ways, apart from the institutional things, less united now today than we were 25 years ago. In other words, I think in terms of unification, we are regressing, not progressing.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you've said that you think in the UK we had one common enemy, which was white prejudice, but that's gone underground now.
Yeah, which is even worse.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. But you're not walking down the street and hearing the N-word, and to some degree you can be economically mobile. So I think a lot of us think we are better off than some others, if you understand, and that's right across all the ethnic groups within the African descent community. So because there's no enemy, and interestingly enough, when they first came over here, 1948, the Windrush, Yeah, we know they were coming way before then, but the African Caribbean community was so tight. You know, there was an economic infrastructure and a real community. You couldn't go down, you couldn't leave your street without your mother and father knowing before you got back. You know, really cohesive. Everybody looked out for each other, the partner monies and everything like that. It all worked. And I think in around 1978, when Margaret Thatcher came in and opened up council housing and, you know, an opportunity to buy your house, a lot of the African Caribbean community, which was really strong at the time, those who could leave their community, left their community. And that created a huge vacuum for entrepreneurialism, community leadership, and development, and various other things. The one thing that stayed true and consistent is the church. Yeah, the church has been a force since those days to present. But I also question, is it relevant ministry now? The dynamics have changed with young people. Are they really looking after the community as what I feel and lots of others perceive the church should be doing?
So can I ask you a question? Would you say that the ability to become upwardly mobile in recent years has in fact created a new divide within the African Caribbean community in the UK?
Good question. I'd like to answer it in this way though. I think our values have shifted. Yeah, the principles we had from our elders, looking after one another, and you cited it earlier on, the common enemy. The common enemy disappeared, and the digital age was born, and each generation has, I would say, you know, moved away from those values that was bestowed on us from the 1950s and 60s. And I don't necessarily would lay being economically mobile has destroyed our community, because that's the same for all communities. It's the same with the Muslim community. It's the same with the Sikh community. There's a lots of Muslims in the Muslim community have left the right path. Some of them are coming back. Some of them won't come back. So it's happened to lots of other ethnic groups and religious groups. So I don't feel that's the one single narrative that has caused that. But certainly I think the principles of our elders, looking after one another, discipline, always say good morning, excuse me, and please and thank you if you're speaking. All of those things I think have moved away in every group. And I think for our group and the colors of our skin, we have really found it difficult to move with the times and still stay cohesive.
Yeah, but that's an inevitable result of acculturation. And as you say, it is part of the narrative. But if it's any consolation, you know, those qualities that you speak of discipline and obedience and respect for your elders and so on, their loss is not peculiar to African Caribbean communities in the UK. It's very much part of the problem here in the Caribbean, and in many respects a bigger problem here in places in Jamaica. And last week's experience of what happened in one community is evidence of the fact that we have a major problem in terms of discipline and return to old values, which is now missing from the society.
Do you think that's a global thing, Ian, or do you think?
I think it's a global thing. I think it's the effect of globalization, the penetration of the media across all countries of the world, and the fact that the local is now the international, and even within a place like Jamaica, for instance, where we used to talk about people in a country bumpkin or a country boy, The fashions that you see in Kingston, you will go into the Rolliers and see the same fashions. Exactly.
Yeah. Ian, it's been an amazing opportunity to talk to you again, and thank you so much. And I'm going to revisit some more of these narratives with you later on. But for now, thank you so much for your time, and God bless you in all your endeavors.
My pleasure. Same to you.
Bye-bye now.